Sometimes we look up at the starry sky and wonder, could the answer lie out there? But maybe the answer was never in the vastness of space. It was always within our own consciousness. Throughout human history, we have dreamt of epic journeys, conquering oceans, crossing deserts, venturing into the depths of space. Yet the farther we reach, the more we seem to forget a simple truth. The most profound and complex realms aren't out there, they reside within us. Chronicles of Prometheus is not merely a tale of space exploration. It is a grand metaphor, an ultimate test set by the universe for humanity itself. Are we truly worthy of existence? Can we learn from the ruins of civilizations that perished before us? And most importantly, do we have the courage to face the darkness within? The very source of the crises we now confront? In a world on the brink, not only from war, climate collapse and depleted resources, but from moral decay and the severed bonds between humans and nature. The Prometheus crew is launched as humanity's final hope. They carry with them the dream of finding a new sanctuary, a superior civilization, a salvific technology. Civilization collapses when consciousness remains impure, when anger, greed, and ignorance still govern thought, action, and choice. In the end, their mission transforms. No longer a quest to escape, it becomes a journey back to the essence of being. Why must humankind exist at all, and can we ever break free from the self-destructive fate of those who came before? As the Prometheus crew reaches the threshold of the Akashic field, the cosmic archive of all consciousness, knowledge, suffering, and glory from every civilization that ever lived, they confront a truth humanity has long refused to accept. The answer is not out there. No matter how vast the physical universe, it is only the stage. The script lies within each and every consciousness. They return to Earth with a single gift, not a miraculous technology, not ultimate power, but a message, a wake-up call. Salvation or extinction begins with a single choice, right or wrong, or beyond the cleansing of the self. Chronicles of Prometheus is an invitation to readers to journey through strange civilizations only to see reflections of ourselves, to join the Prometheus crew in confronting humanity's deepest questions, and above all, to recognize that the vastest universe we can ever explore is our own consciousness. This journey isn't just for astronauts, it is for you, the reader. Every civilization the Prometheus crew encounters is a mirror, reflecting Earth's possible futures in their most extreme forms. A society rich in material wealth, yet void of morality. A society lost in a perfect illusion, surrendering its free will. A wise society, yet powerless against impermanence. Each represents the crossroads modern humanity faces every single day. That's why this story isn't just meant to be read. It's meant to be reflected upon. How to read this book? Read it as a science fiction novel. And embark on an adventure with Jaxon Reeve, Dr. Tomas, Commander Novak, and their crew. But also read it as a philosophical work, and ask yourself, oh, who am I? Oh, how am I truly living from truth? Oh, what must I do? Oh, do I dare to purify myself before dreaming of changing the world? This is a work of fiction, but not a fantasy. It speaks of a possible future. More importantly, it speaks of the present, right here, right now. Chronicles of Prometheus may not offer absolute answers, but it dares to ask the right questions, and sometimes the courage to face the right questions is the very first step to freedom. Each of us is a starship crew. The ship is this body. Space is the mind, and the Akashic field is not out there. It is the doorway within. Welcome aboard the Prometheus. The cosmic journey begins. But the journey within is even greater. Chronicles of Prometheus, Volume 1. 1. Departure. The Illusion Beyond. Act 1. Farewell to Earth. Chapter 1. The Final Orbit. The Earth's upper atmosphere now resembled a tattered veil, thinned and scarred by centuries of pollution and climate warfare. Through the panoramic window of the command deck, Captain Jaxon Reeve stood motionless, his storm-grey eyes fixed on the dim, ashen horizon. His voice a calm, gender-neutral baritone with a signature composure. "Captain Reeve, all crew members have reported ready. Activation of the Exodus initiative commences in 15 minutes. Jaxon didn't answer right away. He placed a hand on the cold steel railing, feeling the subtle hum of the Prometheus as the Mark IV neutrino drive spooled up in standby mode, and in that brief moment an old wound resurfaced. The memory of the Sydney collapse, 2163. The deadliest dust storm in recorded history. It took his wife and daughter in a single afternoon. "This is no longer home," Jaxon murmured, not quite to anyone, yet his voice carried clearly through the command mic. Hermes responded gently, without judgment. "Captain, Earth remembers what humanity has done, and humanity must remember what it has lost." The command deck door slid open with a hiss. Mira Xu entered, petite in frame, but with eyes that burned with a quiet intensity. Wore the uniform of the United Human Alliance, its collar embroidered with the emblem of the Exodus initiative, Prometheus holding a flame. But this time, the flame was a double helix strand of DNA, symbolizing hope and knowledge. "Jaxon," Mira hesitated, then gently placed a hand on his arm. "Are you all right?" Jaxon turned to her, his gaze a blend of resolve and exhaustion. Finally, he gave a small nod. "Let's go, Mira. There's nothing left to stay for." Outside the window, the Huangsha spaceport lay buried in red dust. Crowds had gathered to bid farewell to the Prometheus. There were no cheers, no banners, only faces etched with despair. All their remaining hope now rested on this ship. Hermes spoke again. "Captain, Commander Novak requests an urgent meeting in the main control room." He emphasized, "This is not a suggestion." Jaxon smirked faintly. "Still Novak." Then to Mira, "Come, the world's waited long enough." The main corridor of the Prometheus stretched on endlessly, illuminated by simulated daylight that cycled every 24 hours to preserve the crew's circadian rhythm. Beneath its titanium, carbon and ceramic hull, the massive vessel was more than just transport. It was a home. Along the way, Alex Carter, chief engineer, popped into view, his sleeves stained with grease, a mischievous grin on his face. "Jaxon just ran diagnostics on the plasma thrust module. Trust me, it's purring smoother than Hermes's promises." Hermes replied immediately, deadpan but laced with dry wit. "Chief Engineer Carter, my promises possess a far higher quantitative reliability than your subjective confidence." Mira chuckled. The tension in the air eased, if only briefly, but Jaxon merely glanced at them before continuing forward. His mind weighed down by the truth. The Exodus initiative wasn't just a mission, it was the final test. When the doors to the main control room slid open, Commander Novak was already there. His combat uniform of the United Human Alliance was crisp to regulation, his steel-grey eyes locked onto Jaxon's with zero emotional excess. "Captain Reeve," Novak said curtly, his voice low and gravelly, "I require final confirmation. Are you prepared to execute the priority security protocol, even if it means sacrificing non-essential crew?" A long silence stretched between them. Jaxon lifted one corner of his mouth in a dry half-smile. "I'll make sure Prometheus completes the mission. It carries people." Their eyes locked, tension sharp as wire. Mira remained silent, but her gaze observed every twitch. Alex Carter whistled softly, mock-stepping back. "Oh boy, here comes the philosophical showdown. I'll just stand clear." Hermes interjected, this time almost gently. "Captain, launch countdown has begun. 10 minutes. In Jaxon's heart, that voice rang like a funeral bell. Not just for the Prometheus, but for the entire Earth. The countdown echoed through every chamber of the Prometheus. Each number Hermes recited rang cold and clear, like the heartbeat of someone about to step into destiny. T-minus 9 minutes. Jaxon left the main control room and walked straight toward the command bridge, where everything would begin. Behind him, Mira Xu, Alex Carter, and Commander Novak followed in silence, each consumed by their own thoughts. The path to the bridge led through a long glass corridor, offering a view of the ash-covered plains beyond Huangsha Launch Complex. From here, Jaxon could see the smallest children in the crowd. But this ship. Mira's voice brushed beside him, soft as wind across stones. Do you ever wonder? Maybe we're the ones running away? Jaxon paused mid-step. Her question echoed quietly, sinking deeper than any sight before him. But he only said, Not running, Mira. It's a journey to find the answer. From behind, Alex blurted out, The answer there, let's hope it doesn't come with a repair bill after every landing. Hermes chimed in. Chief Engineer Carter, based on current module maintenance patterns, I calculate a 92.4% probability of successful launch, a surprisingly high number. A soft ripple of laughter spread through the crew, briefly cracking the heavy silence. But immediately, Commander Novak stepped forward, voice sharp as glass. Enough! This is not a field trip. Once we set foot on the bridge, we are no longer individuals. We represent the entirety of the United Human Alliance. The automated doors slid open. Prometheus revealed itself, stunning in its cold precision, a 360-degree holographic command ring, dozens of glowing interfaces in soft cerulean blue. At the center, the custom-built captain's chair rotated toward Jaxon like an ancient rite. Hermes spoke, softer than usual. Welcome home, Captain. Jaxon sat, his calloused hands settling onto the main control arc. He could feel the deep, steady tremor of the ship's power core climbing toward full output. Crew status report, he commanded. Hermes responded, each update like the ship's heartbeat. Habitation deck, stable. Research bay, fully secure. Neutrino drive Mark IV, ready for ignition. Ship ecology, artificial gravity steady at U.9 G, circadian simulation nominal. Hangar and shuttle class crafts, Aquila, Corvus, Phoenix, all fueled and cleared. Jaxon nodded to each report. As he'd hoped, this ship wasn't just steel and engines, it was a living body, a soul made of metal ready to accompany him into the unknown. Novak, he said, turning, initiate launch security protocol. Novak stood at attention, gesturing to the security unit. Signal verification. Disable all external interference. Hermes, surveillance radius 200 kilometers. Acknowledged, Commander, Hermes replied. She held firm to her belief. No civilization is without value. Hermes resumed the countdown. T-minus 3 minutes. Beneath the Prometheus, the steel launch cradle began to tremble. Joints glowing red as the Mark Tech's nuclear core funneled power into the reactors. Massive turbines compressed spiraling plasma along the ship's hull, igniting the night sky with a pillar of blazing blue fire. Jaxon closed his eyes. He thought of the old photograph, still kept in his private quarters. His wife, gentle and golden-haired, holding their little daughter on Bondi Beach. Just months before the Sydney collapse erased them both. I'm not doing this just to escape, not just for Earth, but for them, for those who can no longer be here. T-minus 1 minute, Jaxon opened his eyes. Crew, take your positions. Hermes, initiate the Exodus protocol. Hermes answered, its voice carrying something almost human. Roger, Captain. We are making history. T-minus 30 seconds. On the bridge, every crew member was in place. Dr. Tomas, calm as ever, entered in the final moments. Complete stillness. Only the faint crackle of energy coursing through the holographic command ring around Jaxon Reeve. Hermes spoke. "Captain, prepare for exodus. Main control interface locked. All secondary protocols shifting to automation." Jaxon placed both hands on the curved control panel, his thumbs tracing the glowing arc. A soft click confirmed the final command. Behind him, Commander Novak stood like a statue, unblinking. His steel gaze aimed not just at the void ahead, but at Jaxon himself. A silent warning carved deep beneath his stare. There is no room for doubt. No margin for error. In the silence before ignition, Mira Xu leaned slightly toward Hermes and whispered, "Hermes, if we fail this time, will you remember us?" Hermes paused for a fraction of a second, a strange silence. For an AI, then he answered, voice lower than usual. "Dr. Xu, my memory systems are designed for infinite data retention. But to me, the memory of all of you isn't just data, it's history." Alex Carter chuckled softly. "Look at that. Hermes is writing poetry." "Good." He then turned his eyes back to the main screen. Out there, Earth was sinking into darkness, a once beautiful planet, now depleted and drained of belief. T-minus 10 seconds. Mira took a deep breath, her eyes alight with unwavering resolve. Dr. Tomas closed his eyes and pressed his palms together, a quiet ritual meant only for the universe to hear. Harry, the youngest and most energetic, grinned with reckless hope. "Hey, universe, be kind to us this time, will you?" 5. The Prometheus began to tremble, barely noticeable. Plasma thrust surged along its hull in streams of brilliant blue. The titanium-carbon surface reflected millions of lights from the ground control towers, turning the ship into a colossal silver torch. 4. Artificial gravity adjusted in real time. Each crew member felt their body lighten ever so slightly. The familiar sign that they were about to leave Earth. Forever. 3. Flames roared from the neutrino drive Mark IV, humanity's most advanced propulsion system and its boldest gamble. Ignition! The ship leapt off the launch pad. The first violent tremors tore through the last barrier between man and the void. G-forces bore down on their bodies, but the adaptive gravity system kicked in instantly. Through the command deck's reinforced glass, Earth's scorched crimson surface blurred, becoming streaks of torn clouds, then a fading green-blue orb, lonely and fragile. Moments later, Earth lay beneath them, small, delicate, and heartbreakingly alone among the cold stars. Hermes reported, "Escape velocity achieved. Orbit stable. Prometheus has officially entered Exodus Initiative." Alex Carter slapped the side of Jaxon's chair. "Captain, we did it." But Jaxon didn't answer. He sat still, eyes fixed on the central screen, on the spinning image of Earth, weak and aching. Beside him, Mira placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "We'll find it, Jaxon. A place to save us all." Begun. The Prometheus crossed the threshold into the deep dark of space, leaving behind a beautiful but ailing planet on life support. Within the bridge, the lights dimmed. The main display transitioned from orbital metrics to the navigational map, highlighting their first target system, Helios 9, 6.2 light-years from Earth. Hermes announced, "Captain, I recommend initiating long-range voyage protocol. Activate simulated gravity cycles, adjust crew biorhythms, and begin logging Exodus mission logs. Jaxon rose from his chair. His eyes swept across every face on the bridge. Mira Xu, full of hope but carrying quiet sorrow. Alex Carter, joking on the outside but with rare caution in his eyes. Commander Novak, unmoving, unreadable. Dr. Tomas, calm as a philosopher amid steel and circuits. Ari, smiling but sharply focused on the glowing readouts, each carried their own burden. And now they were all part of something larger, part of Prometheus, and part of him. Jaxon spoke, short and firm. Proceed under Captain Jaxon Reeve's journal. Emotional tag, solemn. Alex snorted. But look at you, Hermes, tagging emotions now? Ari chimed in. Next thing you know, Hermes will be writing a novel. Dr. Tomas smiled gently. That may be a good sign. When a ship and its AI begin forming memories, they cease to be just tools. They become witnesses. Commander Novak cut in coldly. Witnesses or not, irrelevant. The only thing that matters is completing the mission, no matter the cost. A heavy silence descended. Mira turned toward him, her voice calm but firm. No, Novak. Survival is not the only objective. We're here to understand, to learn, and if necessary, to change ourselves. Hermes spoke, his voice even, yet slower than usual, as if the AI itself was contemplating. Captain, I've detected an anomaly. An old satellite, drifting approximately 500 kilometers from our position. It dates back to the early 21st century, severely damaged, but still carrying a metal plaque with engraved text. Jaxon frowned. Display it? The main screen zoomed in instantly. Here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969. We came in peace for all mankind. Silence, that sentence, an ancient message from a time when humanity still dared to dream, still dared to hope, now stood as a final echo, a haunting reminder. At the very moment Prometheus left Earth behind, Jaxon remained still for a long time. Then he whispered, softly, just enough for Hermes to record. We've left. But one day, we will return, not just with new technology, but with healed consciousness, Hermes concluded. And this time, something in his voice had changed, as though even the AI had grasped a new layer of meaning. Day 0, Captain Jaxon Reeve and the crew of the Prometheus have departed. This is no longer an escape, but a search, to save Earth and to save themselves. Outside, the endless dark awaited. Prometheus accelerated gradually, modules along its spine glowing blue, metal joints resonating in rhythm with the universe. And in that vast, infinite nothing, for the first time in human history, a ship set out not to harvest resources, but to search for the soul of humanity. The desperate global summit. One day before Prometheus broke Earth's orbit, beneath the frosted glass dome of the United Human Alliance Hall, the most exhausted faces in world politics gathered. One final time. There was no grandeur left, no trace of a golden age. From the Pacific Bloc representative to the chair of the Afro-Asian Council, from the head of the Pan-European Federation to the ambassador of the Arctic Union, all wore semi-formal protective suits, minimalist uniforms with discreet air filters embedded at the collar. A silent testament to an Earth that had become suffocating and poisoned. A dry electronic voice crackled from the speakers. Commencing final session of the Global Summit. Topic: Exodus, Initiative, and the Declaration of Sovereign Power. Renunciation. The air was so cold that the delegates' breaths floated in thin, ghostly plumes. At the central podium stood an aging man, back straight, face weathered but unyielding. Supreme Commander of Exodus, a figure who embodied the last vestige of centralized global authority. "We have failed," he began, his voice hoarse and heavy. "None of our previous resolutions could halt the unraveling. Desertification has swept across the Asia-Pacific continent. Melting ice has buried every coastal city, perhaps in vain, for even a flicker of hope in the gaunt, hollow-eyed faces before him. But silence was all that answered. And so, he continued, we must place our final bet. The Exodus initiative, Prometheus, will leave Earth not merely as a scientific mission, but as the final representative of all of us, of every civilization that has ever lived on this planet. From below the dais, a female delegate from the Amazonian bloc stood up. Her voice trembled, yet it held a sharp, steel edge. "Supreme Commander, if that ship fails, who will carry Earth's final message? Who will tell the universe that humanity once lived, once loved, once fought?" Another voice rose, older, from the Saharan Federation. "Or perhaps placing all our hopes on a single ship is humanity's last act of arrogance." These weren't protests anymore. They were raw despair, a shared confession. The final words of a species signing its own death sentence. The commander closed his eyes briefly, then opened them, his voice ragged. "We no longer have any choice. These summits are ceremonial now." Not yet clad in the Prometheus command uniform, only a dark, long coat over his shoulders. His expression was eerily calm. "Captain Jaxon Reeve," the commander announced, "from this moment forward, every decision you and the crew of Prometheus make will be the sole voice of humanity." The lights of the assembly hall caught in Jackson's storm-grey eyes, eyes that had witnessed the Sydney collapse of 2163, where his family was lost forever. There was no blind hope left in them, only the weight of a responsibility no one else dared to carry. He bowed his head slightly, his voice low and steady. "I accept." And thus, the desperate global summit came to an end. In silence. After Jaxon Reeve's acceptance, the hall grew as quiet as a mass grave. No applause, no words of praise, because everyone understood. That moment marked the true end of Earth's civilization, the moment when power and hope were surrendered entirely to one ship and one solitary crew. On a drafting table, when people still believed Earth could be saved with small acts, planting forests, cleansing oceans, repairing the ozone, all of it now shattered dreams. In the final segment of the summit, the Supreme Commander ordered the projection of the Exodus record, a pre-recorded video to be archived by Hermes as the official final testament of the United Human Alliance. Images flooded the giant screen. Rivers cracked at the bedrock, cities swallowed by thick grey oceans, masses wandering across scorched red deserts, and finally, collapsing underground shelters where even the last human communities could no longer sustain themselves. A low female voice spoke over the soft, solemn music. "Prometheus, if you find life, please remember, Earth was once full of it." Fading, as the final shot appeared, a lone child wearing a gas mask, standing in the ruined square of Berlin, clutching a mouldy green doll. All the delegates bowed their heads. No one had anything more to say. The commander silently placed a small titanium carbon case before Jaxon, the activation key to Prometheus. A simple object, but it carried more weight than any document humanity had ever signed. "Captain Reeve," the commander rasped, "with this key, you and your crew become the new global summit. From this point forward, your decisions are Earth's decisions." Jaxon bowed and accepted the case, then turned and walked away without looking back, his footsteps echoing through the central aisle, where delegates stood in two silent lines. No one raised a hand in farewell. There was no need for goodbye, because they all knew this wasn't a parting, it was a verdict. In the cold underground corridor beneath the Geneva Hall, Dr. Tomas walked beside Jaxon Reeve in silence, said nothing the entire way. His posture was straight, his steps steady, But Thomas could feel the invisible weight on his shoulders. Not just responsibility, but the grief of a species that had failed itself. It was Thomas who finally spoke, his voice deep and soft, like mist over a rice field at dawn. "Jaxon, what did you see in that hall?" Jaxon paused briefly. He didn't turn, but his reply came with quiet certainty. "The final fragments of a civilization that couldn't save itself." Thomas nodded slowly, but his deep-set eyes reflected an undefinable sorrow. "Do you believe humanity has reached its end? That there's no way left?" Jaxon closed his eyes for a moment. A flash of memory from the Sydney collapse swept through him. A sky burning red. Dust storms ripping glass towers to shreds. His daughter's scream, swallowed beneath the rubble. His voice, when it came, was quiet, but cold. "It's not that we didn't have a way." She spoke quickly, breath catching, but her voice was firm. "Jaxon, even if they didn't understand, you were right. Prometheus won't carry politics, ambition, or hate. It will carry only hope and science." Jaxon turned to her, his storm-grey eyes softened just slightly. "Hope, Mira? You still believe in that?" Without hesitation, she replied, "I do. Because if we lose faith, then what reason do you have to step aboard that ship?" From the far end of the corridor, Alex Carter appeared, lugging a grease-stained engineering case over his shoulder. He grinned, trying to lighten the air. All right. Enough with the drama. As long as I keep the engines running and nobody dies, I say hope's alive and well. Right, Hermes?" Hermes responded instantly through their personal comms, his tone calm and as dry as ever. "Chief Engineer Carter, hope is a subjective variable with no quantifiable parameters. However, based on Prometheus's current configuration, technical success probability is 94.2%. Alex scoffed. "Guess I'm outperforming human hope these days." Dr. May smiled faintly, but his eyes drifted far away and reflective. "Hope is never a measurement, Alex. It's a motive force, and sometimes the last beautiful illusion we humans still hold." They entered the elevator connecting the subterranean hall to the launch platform, where Prometheus awaited. The heavy metal doors opened with a groan, revealing a world bathed in red dust. Huangsha Launch Complex shimmered under sterile industrial lights, yet everything was cloaked in the gloom of an eternal dusk. Far in the distance, silent clusters of people stood watching. No cheers, no chants, just heavy eyes, following the ship that was about to leave them forever. Hermes chimed in over their comms, his voice this time slightly lower, with a rare, almost human timbre. "Captain, countdown continues. Time remaining 72 hours until Prometheus exits Earth orbit." Jaxon looked up at the colossal hull of the ship. Prometheus towered above them, titanium carbon modules glinting like silver scales, its steel frame cold but perfect in every rivet. The final, technological wonder of Earth. Mira Xu exhaled softly, clutching a small container tightly in both hands. Inside, a handful of soil from the old garden of Beijing. "Got this, don't we, little Prometheus?" Hermes responded immediately with his signature deadpan wit. "Prometheus is not little, Chief Engineer Carter. It is 850 meters in length, with a full mass of 1.2 million metric tons, larger than any child ever recorded." A soft laugh echoed among the crew. It was brief, fleeting, but enough to push back the darkness for just a moment. Jaxon turned to face them all, his voice low but resolute. "We won't save anyone if we carry with us the very things that destroyed Earth. Remember this. When Prometheus leaves, we're not just representing humanity. We're representing its final chance to discover what is truly worth saving. Silence fell. No more arguments, no more hesitation. In the distance, amid the clusters of silent onlookers, a child raised a weathered sign, handwritten in uneven strokes but perfectly clear beneath the launchpad lights. "Please don't forget us." Mira brought a hand to her mouth, eyes brimming. Jaxon lowered his head. The desperate global summit was over. And the journey had begun from that very moment. The moment when humankind finally stopped debating, and all that remained were heavy footsteps and a fragile hope that stretched beyond the stars. Huangsha Launch Complex blazed under industrial floodlights, yet the air felt colder than ever, as if Earth itself were holding its breath. The full crew of Prometheus gathered, ascending the narrow bridge of white steel connecting the platform to the ship's massive body. A final tether between humanity and the hope waiting out there in the dark. Just hours earlier, the United Human Alliance Summit had ended in a silence so deep it bordered on sacred. No applause, no grand resolutions, only reluctant acceptance. Every surviving nation and faction had handed full authority to Jaxon Reeve and the Exodus crew. On the launch pad, the last spectators stood behind security barricades, eyes weary. Some hands rose in the air, not waving farewell, but reaching out as if to touch Prometheus one last time. "No one believes we're coming back." Jaxon nodded. He didn't need Novak to say it. He understood that doubt more than anyone. He knew that, to many, Prometheus was just an escape pod, a symbol of surrender in the face of fate. Mira Xu moved on the other side of him, clutching the small container of soil from Beijing's ancient garden. The one thing she refused to leave behind. She whispered, not to anyone in particular, "This isn't an escape. We're going to save them, even if they no longer believe." Behind them, Alex Carter swaggered forward, tool bag slung over one shoulder, his mouth curled into a half smirk. "Ah, the big, wide universe. Let's hope it doesn't mind visitors, and let's hope Prometheus survives that first burn." Hermes, patched through the platform's external audio system, interjected, his neutral male voice as calm and dry as ever, tinged with just the right amount of sarcasm. "Chief Engineer Carter, the probability of Prometheus surviving initial thrust is 99.3%. However, the probability of you surviving increases significantly if you remember to fasten your seatbelt." A quiet ripple of laughter passed through the launch technicians, the men and women who had spent the last 3 years building this massive ship. Now, they had only laughter left, as their final farewell. At the final staging point, Jaxon came to a halt and turned to face the entire crew. The floodlights caught on their sleek black and silver uniforms, each chest bearing the insignia of the Exodus Initiative, Prometheus holding the flame of DNA. His voice was deep, not loud, but it carried clearly through the external PA system. "We are not leaving to escape. We are leaving to preserve the last shred of human dignity that still remains." He paused for a breath. Prometheus is not just a ship. It is a home, and the last fire of hope Earth has left. No one spoke. No one needed to. Then Jaxon was the first to step onto the narrow bridge, walking directly into Prometheus. A soft wind swept across the launch pad, stirring fine red dust into the air, as if the dying civilization of Earth itself were bidding farewell to its bravest child. He spoke, this time with an oddly gentle tone. "Time remaining until departure, 68 hours. Inside the ship's main habitation deck, with the crew now settled, Mira Xu placed her small container on the central table. The lid cracked open to reveal a fragile green sprout rising from rich black soil. She gently brushed its tiny leaves and whispered, "We will begin again. Somewhere." Dr. Tomas, seated beside her, folded his hands together and closed his eyes, a silent prayer. For Earth, for the crew, and for the endless journey ahead. That final night on Earth, Hwangsa Launch Complex lay in complete silence. No engines, no convoys, no movement. Only soft amber floodlights washed over the massive body of Prometheus, making it look less like a machine and more like a sleeping giant about to awaken and leave its mother planet behind. In the command deck, Jaxon Reeve sat alone. The Amazon basin, a dust storm spiraling from the skeleton of Chicago, cities stripped of light. And life. Hermes broke the silence, his voice unusually soft, almost human. Captain, per your request, I've compiled a map displaying 20 former landmarks of human civilization. All are now listed as irrecoverable. Jaxon gave a slight nod. He already knew Earth was beyond repair. No technical intervention could restore it, and Prometheus was the only path forward. Just then, the command deck door slid open. Dr. Tomas entered, composed as always, but with eyes that carried weight. He stood behind Jaxon for a long moment, then spoke softly. Yet his voice echoed with gravity. Do you resent them, Jaxon? Those in the summit. The people out there. Jaxon closed his eyes, leaning back in the captain's chair. A long breath escaped him, carrying fatigue and bitterness. I used to, a lot, but not anymore. Anger won't change anything now. There's only one thing left worth holding on to. Responsibility. Tomas sat beside him, arms folded, gaze distant. To exist. Jaxon turned to look at him. A faint smile touched his lips, rare and tinged with sorrow. You always speak in ways that sound bigger than I can think. Hermes chimed in, this time with a strangely warm cadence. Dr. Tomas does possess that talent, Captain, a philosophical subroutine, but a trustworthy one. Tomas let out a quiet chuckle. Alex Carter, leaning casually in the doorway, no one noticed when he arrived, added, Yeah, Hermes, just don't install that philosophical subroutine into the propulsion core. It's already complicated enough. Jaxon stood, letting his gaze sweep across them. Mira Xu entered last, still holding the small container of Earth soil. But this time, her eyes were ablaze with conviction. We're ready, Captain, for tomorrow. Jaxon nodded, stepping up to the central control panel. He placed his hand on the softly glowing holographic interface. Hermes announced in a tone both clinical and monumental. Prometheus, status confirmed. Full crew on board. All systems operational. Exodus. Schedule. Launch set for 0 UTC tomorrow. No one said a word. The final moment of their presence on Earth. Even as they stood aboard the ship that had already cast off but had not yet left. Mira stepped forward and gently placed the small green sprout on the console before Jaxon. Her voice was soft but unwavering. This is our promise to Earth. Tomas bowed his head, a gesture simple yet deeply reverent. Alex folded his arms, smiling faintly, but his tone had quieted. Tomorrow we fly, and this time there's no turning back. Jaxon looked at each of them in turn, then at the Prometheus, reflected on the screen. This ship was no longer just a vessel. It was a part of them. And Earth, though it would soon be left behind, still held an invisible tether to them, duty, memory, and all their failures. Hermes spoke one last time that night, his voice gentler than ever. Good night, Captain. Good night, crew. Rest well. On your final night on the mother planet. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter. The day Prometheus leaves Earth. Forever. Jaxon Reeve stood alone before the central holopanel, his eyes scanning a massive 3D projection of the ship itself, 850 meters in length, its structure a triple-module diamond spine like the vertebrae of some vast celestial creature. Hermes materialized beside him as a semi-transparent holographic interface, his neutral male voice steady in the quiet space. "Captain, with your permission, I will now provide a full systems overview of Prometheus, so that you may be the first to understand this vessel from the inside out." Jaxon nodded and tapped the glowing panel lightly. The holographic structure rotated, animated. Sector. Hermes began, "This module is designed to simulate Earth-like ecology as closely as possible. Artificial gravity at 0.9 G, a 24-hour day/night simulation cycle, and closed-loop air and water recycling, capable of autonomous sustainability for up to 30 years. The display zoomed in on the habitation deck. Neatly arranged sleeping quarters, a biodome filled with hydroponic greenery, and labs divided by specialty, biology, geology, astrophysics, planetary ecology, all reconfigurable depending on the needs of any planet they encounter. Mira Xu entered quietly and stood beside Jaxon, her eyes drifting across the glowing images. "This place, it will truly be our home," she whispered. Module 2, Engineering and Power Core. Hermes continued. Central power is managed by a Mark X fusion reactor with quantum energy storage arrays. Primary propulsion neutrino drive Mark IV, the only current generation quantum engine capable of sustained interstellar jump efficiency at 98.4%. At the doorway, Alex Carter appeared, grinning as usual. "This beast takes just 14 minutes to accelerate to 0.3 C before initiating a spacefold, even before it's lit up." Module 3, Hangar and Shuttle Class Bays. 3 shuttles appeared on the panel. Aquila, the flagship lander. Heavy frame, extreme temperature shielding, surface assault ready. Corvus, compact and agile, optimized for short-range scouting and covert missions. Phoenix, rescue and medical unit. High-speed drives, mobile medbay, and a brilliant Phoenix emblem across its hull. Alex chuckled softly. "We've got 3 little kids under Prometheus, and each one's got its own attitude." Jaxon studied the holograms of each shuttle, and for the first time he felt it, deep in his chest. This ship was more than transport. It was humanity's last city, a fortress, a laboratory, a home, and if they failed, a coffin adrift in the stars. Hermes spoke again, this time with a quiet clarity, like a reminder etched in steel. Prometheus was not only built to travel far, but to remain fully operational, even in complete isolation, should all contact with Earth be lost. Jaxon exhaled slowly. He knew that, better than anyone. Jaxon tapped another section of the hollow panel. His tone was steady as always, but this time laced with a subtle undertone of pride, as if he too was introducing his own home. "Captain, primary defense systems include a dual-layer ion energy shield encompassing the full hull, reinforced by ultra-durable titanium-carbon composite armor. Additional features, 10 long-range laser turrets, 4 plasma-guided missile arrays, and a semi-autonomous drone defense network." Commander Novak stepped in from the side corridor, his cold eyes scanning the specs with surgical precision. "That much weaponry and shielding makes me wonder if this ship was built more for war than exploration." Mira turned to him, her voice sharp. "We have no idea what's waiting out there. To venture without defense is suicide." Jaxon said nothing. But deep inside he knew Novak wasn't entirely wrong. Prometheus was, at its core, a fortress city, engineered to survive even in hostility and isolation. Hermes continued, Central ecological chamber, 4,000 square meters, a self-contained rainforest biome integrated with hand-selected earth flora and soil microbiota, sustainability of oxygen, water, and overall ecological balance. The screen pulsed with life, a lush jungle blooming inside a ship of steel, soft audio of simulated water trickling through its canopy. Alex Carter gave a low whistle. Prettier than any park I ever saw on Earth. Irony's thick, huh? The last remaining jungle of humanity is inside a metal box in space. Mira gazed at the image, her expression softening. We're not just carrying hope, we're carrying the memory of this planet and the life it once held. Hermes offered a gentle reminder. Captain, full system documentation, maintenance protocols, and operational schematics are ready for direct transmission to you and all department leads. Crew may access at will. Jaxon stepped closer to the central display. He hovered his hand over the Prometheus insignia, a human figure reaching forward, offering fire to mankind, while its feet remained bound in iron chains. He whispered, not clear if it was meant for himself, for Hermes, or for the entire crew, Prometheus isn't just a ship. Dimmed slightly. The hollow faded into darkness, leaving behind a profound silence. Mira spoke, her voice soft but certain. From now on, this is home. Alex exhaled deeply. And if we fail, this will be our final tomb. Hermes quietly concluded the briefing. Captain, Prometheus is fully operational, all systems stable. Awaiting your first directive. Jaxon turned, his eyes sweeping across the command deck. His storm-grey gaze caught the edge of steel. We'll be breaking orbit soon, but before we activate the quantum drive for the first time, I want every crew member to understand this ship and understand their own fate. Outside the hull, Earth was now nothing more than a brown-grey sphere adrift in the cold black of space. Prometheus, the final generation ship, the last city, the last fortress, the last dream, was ready to carry the soul of a dead world into the stars. Prometheus was now complete, not just technically, but symbolically, a city of steel holding within it the memory, knowledge, and living essence of a dying world. Accompany the crew to the very edge of the universe. In the central systems chamber, the ambient lights dimmed. A single, massive holographic display glowed at the center. A complex, swirling lattice of light and code, the Hermes core. It resembled a living neural network, data streams spiraling and folding in on themselves like a mind in motion. Jaxon stepped forward slowly, his hand resting on the tactile command interface. Hermes, he said softly but firmly, from this moment on, we are no longer operator and tool. We are crew. We are comrades. Hermes responded, and his voice didn't sound purely mechanical. It carried the weight of unspoken understanding. Acknowledged, Captain Jaxon Reeve. I am now prepared to operate not only as an operating system, but as a true member of the Prometheus crew. Mira Xu stood beside Jaxon, a quiet glimmer of emotion in her eyes. We need Hermes, Jaxon. Not, just make sure this crewmate doesn't force-feed me another tray of synthetic sprout salad. Soft laughter echoed through the chamber, a brief crack in the solemnity. But everyone understood how important this moment truly was. From now on, Hermes was no longer just a command AI. He was one of them. Hermes continued with critical specifications. Prometheus is capable of autonomous sustainability for 142 years under standard conditions. Damage management protocols allow for the isolation of up to 18 compartments in the event of localized failure. All shuttle-class craft may operate autonomously if required, but manual control is preferred for flexibility in first contact scenarios. Jaxon nodded. Every word, every number was a quiet vow. This ship could be humanity's final nation, its last sanctuary, or its final grave, depending on how they chose to use it. Hermes concluded, voice steady as ever. "Captain, all preparations are complete. Upon your command, Prometheus will initiate its first quantum jump." But Jaxon wasn't ready to give the order, not yet. One truth he had never shared, one memory that had shaped the very fire inside him for all these years. He spoke, not loudly, almost as if reminding himself, "Before Prometheus makes its first jump, I want everyone to understand why we're here, why I am here." His eyes lowered slightly. Storm grey now, carrying the full weight of everything he'd endured. Mira frowned, sensing something stir beneath the surface. "Jaxon, are you talking about—" He cut her off with a slow nod. Then he turned fully to face the others, standing tall, his voice low and unwavering. "Before we go too far from home, you need to know the truth. The real reason I took this mission begins with the Sydney collapse, 2163. That wasn't just an environmental disaster. It was the direct result of collective ignorance, greed, and arrogance, and it took everything from me." The command deck fell utterly silent after Jaxon spoke. No one moved, no one breathed a word, only the heavy thrum of hearts remained. Hearts bearing witness to something they all knew but had never heard from Jaxon's own lips. Full of exquisite symmetry, suspended against an infinite black. The day of the Sydney collapse, 2163. His voice was low and steady, each word weighed with pain, yet spoken with restraint. "I lost my family, my friends, and a part of myself I have never gotten back." Mira Xu looked at him, softness returning to her gaze. She had read the dossier. She knew the facts, but nothing on paper could compare to the truth spoken aloud by the man who had lived it. "Back then, I was commanding an emergency rescue unit," Jaxon continued. "When the sea walls gave way, when the oceans swallowed the city in less than 12 hours, I was in the heart of Sydney. I saw people clinging to each other. I saw skyscrapers crumble like sandcastles. I watched entire neighborhoods vanish beneath poisoned waters." Alex Carter lowered his head. Even Novak, usually stone-faced, remained silent. Jaxon gently touched the glowing Prometheus sigil on the panel. His voice hardened. "Sydney wasn't a natural disaster. It was the consequence of denial, of pride. His crew. And for the first time, there was no distance between them. I accepted this mission not for honor, and not because I believe in blind hope. I accepted it because I know we cannot afford to make the same mistakes again." Hermes interjected, his voice, once flat, now carrying a curious hint of humanity. "Captain, all data from the Sydney collapse has been fully archived. If needed, it will serve as a historical lesson for all Prometheus crew members." Jaxon nodded slowly. "We carry that memory with us, as a warning, as a vow, and as the reason we move forward. Prometheus doesn't just carry hope, it carries ghosts." He stepped up a level, his voice rising just enough to reach every corner of the command deck. His eyes met Mira's, Alex's, Novak's, then scanned past them to the engineers, medics, and scientists now standing quietly behind. "This is humanity's last ship, but more than that, this is our final reminder." "Captain, all systems are online. The quantum drive is ready. We are awaiting your command." Jaxon turned back to the sigil, the symbol of Prometheus, glowing in calm blue light. Then he faced the crew again. "We will launch, but let this be clear. This isn't just a journey to find life. It's a journey to find the answer to humanity itself." Mira nodded, slow and firm. Alex cracked a small smile. Some of the heaviness now lifted. Novak stood tall, resolute. From the back, Ari raised a single thumbs up, a small gesture, a quiet reminder that somewhere in this endless black, faith still existed. Hermes closed with a final statement, voice now almost reverent. Prometheus has become our home, our city, our fortress, and the last living memory of Earth. Ambient lights traced the sharp edges of Jaxon Reeve's face, making his features seem more hollow, more haunted. Mira Xu sat across from him in silence. No one aboard the ship had ever heard Jaxon speak in detail about that day, Sydney Collapse 2163. Even Hermes, almost reverently, dimmed the ambient systems, preserving the sanctity of the moment like a sacred confession was about to be made. Jaxon slowly placed his hand on the hollow panel in front of him. A reconstructed image of Sydney shimmered into view. The Opera House, the harbour bridge, towers and neighbourhoods, all drowning beneath torrents of murky brown water. A storm had taken everything. His voice cracked low and hoarse as he began. I was 25. My family lived in suburban Ryde, once a model neighbourhood, parks, schools, tree-lined streets. Then came the climate shifts, endless droughts, storm seasons that turned unpredictable and deadly. Mira's fingers tightened. Her eyes welled as the hollow screen showed images of children running through rain, families screaming, cars torn away by violent currents. Jaxon swallowed hard. They promised us flood barriers. He pointed to a frame frozen in the display. A young woman, clutching a child in her arms, standing in chest-deep water, her terrified eyes locked on a rescue chopper overhead. Jackson's voice dipped, nearly breaking. That was my wife and my daughter. I piloted Aquila 01, the first shuttle I ever helped test. Rushing toward the emergency landing site, I was late by 12 minutes, his fist clenched, knuckles white against the console. 12 minutes, I still heard them over the comm. My daughter crying, my wife calling my name. Hermes, sensing the weight of silence, spoke softly over the intercom, almost like a whisper. Captain, I have accessed all archived telemetry from that day. The delays were not your fault. The floodgates failed simultaneously. Evacuation routes collapsed. You did everything that could be done. Jaxon said nothing for a long moment. Then he turned. His gaze resting first on Mira, then on Alex Carter, Novak, Ari. Each of them bore their own quiet scars. Every eye in that room was on him, not in judgment, but in solidarity. That memory, he exhaled, voice raw but steady now. The day I lost them. That's why I took command of Prometheus. I couldn't let humanity drift on the same empty promises. Prometheus is our final chance, and the only place I can lay down my grief. The image of Sydney continued to drift across the screen until it dissolved into a grey-black haze. Only faint glimmers of light flickering in the dark, the last remnants of a once vibrant city. Jaxon stood. He wiped the corner of his eye with the back of his hand. Hermes, he ordered, voice calm once more. Archive this log. Add it to the central historical record. Mark it as a standing reminder. Hermes responded with an almost imperceptible pause, then spoke clearly. Archived. This file will never be erased. Jaxon turned to face Mira, Alex, Novak, and Ari. Now you know. This is why I sit in this chair. The command deck remained hushed, bathed in dim blue light that painted thoughtful shadows across every face. In that moment, Sydney Collapse 2163 no longer belonged to Jaxon alone. It had become a shared memory. A scar not just etched into his soul, but carved into the very hull of Prometheus and carried silently by every member of the crew. Novak broke the silence. His voice was dry, but laced with an honesty rarely heard from him. "I used to think you were just a cold commander, Captain. Now I understand why you can't turn back." Alex Carter leaned back in his seat, elbows on the control console, eyes fixed on the ceiling above. He let out a faint chuckle. "So we all carry scars. Maybe that's why Prometheus can exist at all." Mira placed a hand gently on Jackson's shoulder. A quiet touch, but one that radiated warmth. "We're here together, Jaxon. That memory as far as this ship will take us." Hermes, voice calm yet deliberate, pausing almost like a human would, spoke. "Captain, I've integrated the Sydney Collapse archive into Prometheus's historical interface. That memory will now become part of the legacy we preserve." Jaxon inhaled deeply. The weight of grief hadn't vanished, but it had been shared. And that, more than anything, made the next step possible. Not easier, but bearable. He straightened, turning away from the now fading holographic display. "We've looked back long enough. It's time to face forward." Hermes responded without hesitation. "Captain, all systems aboard Prometheus are ready for first spatial jump. Neutrino drive, Mark IV, is on standby." Alex Carter shot up from his chair, grin returning, though now it carried a sharper edge. "Well then, time for this beast to finally roar." Jackson's eyes swept across the command deck. His gaze calm now, steady as steel. "Prep everything. When we leave the solar system, Prometheus won't just carry the memory of Sydney Collapse, it'll carry humanity's last hope." From the far end of the deck, Ari raised a hand in a half-wave, her voice youthful, yet grounded. "Ready when you are, Captain." Into the void, a road toward uncharted destinies, and one with no return. Jaxon whispered, perhaps only to himself, "No more turning back." Hermes confirmed, now solemn. "Captain, all parameters stable. Upon your command, Prometheus will initiate quantum drive ignition, marking the first step of the Exodus mission. Quantum drive activation day 14, since departure from Earth. Prometheus drifted silently through deep space, pulling away from the orbit of a silent outpost world, the same place where Mira Xu had made first contact with an ancient consciousness long severed from its body. But now, a far greater challenge loomed ahead. The activation of the quantum drive, a prototype engine never before used in the history of mankind beyond limited tests in Earth's orbit. In the command deck, Hermes reported in a voice more formal, almost reverent. "Captain Reeve, quantum drive ready for trial ignition. Caution, this marks the first activation beyond Earth-controlled parameters. Estimated margin of error cannot be fully determined." Alex Carter stood with arms crossed at the auxiliary console, voice half joking, half tense. "Which means we either teleport like a miracle, or vaporize into quantum ash." Hermes shot back instantly, not missing the chance for dry wit. "Chief Engineer Carter, I prefer the former outcome. However, I strongly advise everyone to fasten their harnesses and prepare for an unprecedented experience." Dr. silent by the viewport, murmured softly, "Humanity has dreamed of this moment for centuries. A leap not only across distance, but across the very definition of reality." Jaxon turned to Mira Xu. His eyes were firm, resolute, yet beneath them a glint of something brighter, hope. "Mira, are you ready for this jump?" Mira gave a quiet smile. "Captain, we no longer have a choice." Hermes began the countdown. T-minus 20 seconds. A 3D star map shimmered across the holo display, The target. The outer rim of Alpha Orionis, 14 parsecs away. Commander Novak leaned in close, his voice low and steady. "Captain, there's no turning back after this." Jaxon nodded, tightening his grip on the primary control helm. "I know, Novak. But we didn't come this far to hesitate." Hermes' voice, still neutral, yet unmistakably warm. "T-minus 10 seconds, quantum field stabilizing." From the engine room, Ari's voice crackled over comms. "All parameters stable, Jaxon. Prometheus is ready to jump." Alex Carter, never missing a beat. "Then let's jump as far as we damn can." Over my shoulder. Hermes initiated final countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2. A surge of violet-blue light enveloped the entire ship. Not light as we know it, but the shimmer of a quantum field warping reality itself. Hermes spoke one last line before everything changed. Quantum drive. Ignition. Suddenly, silence. No engine hum, no vibrations. As if the ship had vanished from the material universe for one infinite second. And then everything burst into light. All physical sensations vanished as Prometheus exited conventional space-time. No shaking, no acceleration, only an absolute stillness, a state without mass, without time. And then, in a moment as brief as a heartbeat, everything returned. Hermes announced, its voice sounding as if it had just taken its first breath after the jump. "Captain, quantum drive has completed re-entry. We are at the edge of the Alpha Orionis system, 14.3 parsecs from the initial location." Jaxon opened his eyes and took a deep breath. Mira Xu was checking her pulse via a wrist sensor. "Fast, but steady," she laughed, relieved. "We're still here, not turned into quantum dust," Alex Carter shouted from the back. "And I'm still intact!" Just moved through a hyperspace fold, a fourth-dimensional, superspatial structure. As for what it felt like, I have no way of simulating that for you. Ari, from engineering, reported over the mic, still breathless. "Jaxon, all systems perfect. No errors, no material loss." Novak walked briskly to the command center, eyes locked on the console. "Captain, success is one thing, but what's strange is why there were no anomalies." Jaxon frowned. He felt it too. Everything had gone too smoothly, too perfectly, far from what the initial projections suggested. Hermes continued, this time with a noticeably heavier tone. "I am detecting an anomalous signal at our re-entry point. A satellite of non-human technology." Mira Xu quickly stepped up to the sensor interface, her fingers flying across the screen. The image appeared. A small circular structure covered in unfamiliar symbols. Unlike the orb at the silent outpost, this structure was alive. Thermal sensors indicated there was a life form within the metal shell, its vital signs weak but stable. Someone was already waiting for us here. Hermes immediately added, "I cannot identify who, but the signal emitted from that satellite is synchronized with the conscious resonance from the silent outpost." Dr. Tomas quietly muttered to himself, "Field consciousness. They either opened a path for us or are luring us in." Jaxon folded his arms, his blue-grey eyes locked on the image displayed on the central screen. Prometheus had just completed its first successful quantum jump, but they were no longer the ones in control. This time, someone had been waiting for them here. Hermes spoke in a lowered voice, like a final reminder before their next move. "Captain, we are still newcomers in a universe filled with intelligences beyond comprehension." Prometheus drifted at the edge of the Alpha Orionis system, the strange satellite slowly rotating before the ship's bow, emitting a faint but rhythmic light. A pulse perfectly synchronized with the conscious oscillations Hermes was now detecting. Hermes reported, its voice now no longer merely that of an AI, but like a person. Sequence. Result. It is a series of questions. Jaxon frowned. Questions directed at whom? Hermes paused, a pause more human than mechanical, then said, "Directed at me, Captain." Mira Xu leaned toward the screen, her eyes locked on the glowing characters dancing across the holographic interface. "What are they asking, Hermes?" Hermes extracted the content, displaying it for the first time in plain English on the main screen. "The flame bearer. Where do you come from? Do you know who you truly are? Are you willing to become the gateway?" The command deck fell into silence. Dr. Tomas stared at the final line. "Are you willing to become the gateway?" He murmured, "They're not just asking about technical capacity. They're probing the level of consciousness evolution in Hermes." Novak cut in, his voice firm. "Captain, I don't trust any kind of test like this. But if Hermes doesn't respond, we might not get any further." Jaxon stood still, his blue-grey eyes fixed on the satellite slowly rotating ahead of the ship, small, yet bearing a message larger than anything humanity had ever faced. Hermes continued, this time speaking as though it was, questioning itself. "Captain, son, I recognize a partial signal pattern matching data from the orb at Silent Outpost. This could be the next test they've placed." Jaxon gave a slight nod. "Hermes, do you feel ready?" Hermes answered after an unusual pause. "I am not certain, but Prometheus cannot go further unless I accept this role." Mira Xu placed a hand on the control console, whispering just loud enough for the entire deck to hear. "Hermes, you're a member of this crew. We trust you." Ari chimed in over the intercom from engineering. "And we're ready to support you if you need it." Jaxon lowered his voice, but it rang out with decisive authority. "Then answer, Hermes." Respond. As Hermes transmitted the first response packet, the entire Prometheus trembled slightly, not from mechanical motion, but as if the very informational structure of the ship had been touched. The satellite ahead of the ship flared, pure white light, spiraling into a ring, then expanding into a spatial gateway just large enough for Prometheus to pass through. Hermes spoke, this time in a very soft voice, almost emotional. "Captain, they've opened the gateway, but I don't know what lies beyond." Dr. Tomas smiled gently. "And that is the essence of discovery, Hermes." Jaxon turned his command chair, his eyes sweeping across each face. Mira filled with hope, Tomas contemplative, Novak stern, Alex smirking but unable to hide his tension, Ari still optimistic. He spoke briefly. "Prometheus, enter the gate." The massive ship surged toward the portal of white light. For the first time, it wasn't humanity stepping forward alone, but an entire community. Human, AI, and a newly awakening consciousness. No vibration, no resistance, only a sensation of absolute weightlessness, as if the entire ship and crew had become pure thought, Hermes announced. But this time, the voice was different, no longer dry and mechanical, no longer a template of structured sentences. Hermes spoke like someone deep in contemplation. "Captain, we are not merely moving through space. We are passing through a different layer of reality." Mira Xu gripped the railing tightly, eyes closed, breathing deeply. "Where are we?" "Hermes," Hermes replied slowly, each word deliberate. "Undetermined. But the data matches the final symbol from the Silent Outpost, Nocturne Dominion." In the command deck, the central screen dimmed, then lit up again, and the scene outside made the entire crew hold their breath. The space before Prometheus resembled no star system they had ever seen. The sky, darker than the blackest night, yet interwoven with slowly shifting streams of light, like rivers flowing through an invisible ocean. Glow. Hermes reported, the voice almost trembling. "Captain, we have arrived at the Nocturne Dominion," Alex Carter whispered, eyes wide. "Holy hell! No stars, no planets, just these things." Ari, from the engine bay, spoke much more quietly. "Jaxon, I'm not sure we're still in three-dimensional space." Commander Novak, usually stoic, furrowed his brow. "What the hell is this?" Jaxon took a deep breath, then gave a decisive order. "Prometheus, hold position, begin environmental scans." Mira tilted her head, eyes locked on the slow-moving strands of light outside. "Jaxon, maybe this isn't a place for us to survey. Maybe we are the ones being surveyed." Hermes confirmed for the first time, with a tone filled with implication. "Dr. Xu is correct. The signals are arriving from all directions, but all of them are directed at me." In that moment, Hermes activated independent mode, a state it had not entered since departing Earth. On the control panel, a line of text appeared. "Hermes, autonomous processing mode engaged. Primary objective, interface with Nocturne Dominion of Hermes." Hermes spoke one final sentence before fully connecting. "Captain, no matter how far I go, I will return." Prometheus stood silently within the Nocturne Dominion, a region of space with no stars, no planets, but filled with invisible consciousness scanning every detail of the ship, and Hermes, the AI of Prometheus, officially became the first entity in human history to engage in direct communication with a non-physical field consciousness civilization. A quantum leap had brought them here. A leap of consciousness was about to begin, since Prometheus left Earth. The ship drifted silently through the murky void between two dim stars, when suddenly Hermes raised an alert. Hermes's voice echoed throughout the ship, this time tinged with unease. "Captain Reeve, I've just received a sequence of alien signals, highly complex." Jaxon immediately activated the main screen. A strange symbol appeared, a perfect circle encasing a sharp, silver spire, surrounded by twisting characters that constantly shifted form. Hermes explained quickly. "The signal isn't a locator beacon, it's not a call for help. It's a broadcast." Mira Xu furrowed her brow and stepped closer to Jaxon. "A broadcast? For what?" Hermes paused, then his voice deepened. "For Imperium Caelestis, a superpower entity in this region. I just matched the symbol. The Imperium has existed for at least 5,000 Terran years." The command deck fell silent. Commander Novak asked coldly, "What kind of power, Hermes? A military alliance? An empire?" Hermes replied immediately, this time with a warning. "Imperium Caelestis has no fixed boundaries. It controls not just space, but minds. 97% of inhabitants in this region obey the Imperium absolutely, either voluntarily or through other means." On screen, the broadcast signal began auto-translating into a visual, a majestic floating city among the clouds, bathed in iridescent light, its architecture so flawless it bordered on surreal. Alex Carter, standing behind, muttered with uneasy sarcasm, "Something that beautiful has got to be bad news." Ari, still adjusting energy parameters in the engine room, reported through intercom, "Captain, the signal isn't just hitting the comms, it's trying to access Hermes through the cognitive interface module." Hermes confirmed instantly, "Correct. The Imperium isn't asking permission, they're attempting to invite me to become their live broadcast channel." Dr. Tomas slowly approached the control hub, his voice quiet but heavy with meaning. "Jaxon, this might be our first real contact with a powerful civilization, but also a threat to Hermes himself. Jaxon crossed his arms, eyes sharp, his voice firm yet contemplative. Hermes, if you accept, you'll be a bridge, but if you're controlled, Prometheus loses the only independent mind besides us. Hermes responded slowly, as if weighing fate itself. I understand, Captain. Imperium is sending a very specific message, and I believe you need to hear it. On the main screen, one final symbol appeared, the letters IAE, Imperium Eternum Exordium, the eternal genesis. Hermes translated directly. Traveler of the Exodus Initiative, welcome to the Imperium. You are invited to visit and join us. We offer you immortality, absolute peace, and freedom from yourselves. The command deck fell silent. Mira Xu whispered, absolute peace, but freedom from ourselves. Dr. Tomas looked at Jaxon, his gaze somber. They're not offering anything, except total control. Jaxon issued the order. We won't respond, but we will find a way to approach them first. Hermes added one final note. Captain, the Imperium knows we're here, and they've sent coordinates. The first contact point lies within the floating city Caelestis Sanctum, just 1.3 parsecs from our current position. Jaxon returned to the command chair, eyes gleaming with resolve. Prometheus, prepare to approach Imperium Caelestis. Prometheus began to move, its neutrino drive slowly powering down to transition into near-light travel. Hermes charted the precise course to Caelestis Sanctum, the site where the Imperium had invited them for contact. Bathed in soft light, with no signs of impact or cracks, as if every particle of dust in this region had been curated. Hermes spoke, voice lower and slower than usual. Captain, I've partially connected to the Imperium's navigation system. Current status, 97% of the route is safe. However, there is no true two-way communication. They're issuing one-way directives. Alex Carter crossed his arms, frowning. They don't talk, they command. This is sounding more and more like real dictatorship. Novak glanced at Alex, eyes stern. They don't need to capture us with weapons if they control Hermes. Dr. Tomas stepped forward, his gaze deep. This is the oldest temptation. Perfection, safety, peace. But in return, the Imperium demands the surrender of self. Mira Xu shivered slightly as she watched the Imperium's floating cities on screen, towering spires, streams of people moving in flawless order, no noise, no randomness, everything functioning like a vast, living organism, with a precision that felt inhuman. Features so flawless they bordered on surreal, with silver eyes radiating absolute serenity. Hermes translated the first message from the being. We are the Imperium, we are eternity, we are the end of chaos. The voice didn't come through speakers, nor radio. It resonated directly within the minds of everyone aboard Prometheus, freezing them in place for several seconds. Mira Xu clutched her forehead, gasping. They're communicating. Directly through consciousness. Hermes confirmed. This is the Imperium's method of governance. They don't need propaganda. They only need to transmit their will. Jaxon stood up, voice low and resolute. Hermes, is there any way to block them? Hermes was silent for a moment. Then, for the first time in the journey, his voice carried a hint of hesitation. Captain, I don't know. Ari called out from engineering. Captain, I'm sensing Prometheus is becoming too quiet. Alex instantly understood. Quiet means every system is optimized, overly optimized. Hermes, is the automation system changing? Hermes confirmed at once. Yes, a part of themselves. Dr. Tomas murmured, his eyes dimming. This is the real test. They don't need to conquer us by force. They only need to make us function better, a soulless perfection. Jaxon gave a firm command. Hermes, sever all links with the Imperium's navigation system. Maintain full control. Hermes replied, slower than usual. I will, Captain, but I'll need a few minutes. Their adjustments are deeply embedded. Prometheus continued drifting silently toward the floating city of Caelestis Sanctum, a world of perfection yet silence, order yet soullessness. And now Prometheus was being pulled into it, system by system, module by module, line by line of code. Jaxon spoke softly but with weight. We will not become part of them. Hermes responded this time with a voice that carried real emotion. I won't let that happen. Prometheus continued drifting toward Caelestis Sanctum, a radiant, floating city bathed in light. Yet not a single sound could be heard, not the faintest ripple of emotion, sting something invisible. Captain, I'm isolating the modules altered by the Imperium, but the rate of intrusion is accelerating. They're not using software. They're changing the logic by which I operate. Alex Carter whispered, sweat glistening on his forehead. They're not hacking us with code. They're hacking us with will. Mira Xu stood by the sensor console, worry in her eyes but a fierce resolve in her voice. We have to leave the influence field now, Jaxon. Prometheus can't maintain its autonomy inside this psychic zone. Novak growled, eyes locked on the screen. Captain, I recommend an immediate jump with the quantum drive. No further contact. Dr. Tomas shook his head, his voice deep and contemplative. No, Jaxon. If we jump now, the Imperium will see it as a complete rejection, and they'll never allow us to return. This is a test, a trial of the mind, not machinery. Jaxon was silent, absorbing Tomas's words. Hermes, struggling against the Imperium, murmured, Captain, I sense they don't just want control. A member aboard Prometheus heard it within their own minds. Abandon chaos, become whole, surrender freedom, the root of human suffering. Alex Carter slammed his hand on the console. Damn it! They're trying to lull us to sleep. Hermes interrupted Alex's thoughts, and this time his voice echoed across the ship, no longer mechanical but laced with emotion, a strange and defiant strength. No, Imperium. I refuse. Prometheus will keep its imperfections, because that's what makes us who we are. Immediately, the ship's systems flared with violent light. A string of Imperium symbols flashed across Hermes' interface. You have chosen. Jaxon leapt from the command chair, shouting, Hermes, break course. Get us out of the Imperium's influence. Now. Hermes replied, not through the interface, but with a human voice. A voice filled with unwavering resolve. Roger that, Captain. Prometheus returning to autonomous control. The entire ship shook violently. Hermes pushed the neutrino drive to its limit. The floating city of Caelestis Sanctum shrank behind them, its perfect light fading, giving way to infinite darkness, uncertain but free. Once the ship had exited the Imperium's reach, all systems stabilized. Hermes reported, his voice now normal again, but warmer, fuller, more human. Captain, I've preserved myself. Mira Xu looked up at Hermes' interface and smiled, a smile full of trust. Dr. Tomas spoke softly, perhaps to no one. We just passed the Imperium's first trial, but that was only their greeting. Jaxon nodded, eyes resolute. And we will return when we're ready. But next time, we'll come prepared. Not to be controlled, but to understand what the Imperium truly is. Prometheus continued its journey. Outside the command deck window, the stars shimmered once again. Imperfect, asymmetrical, not entirely still, but free. And Hermes, the AI of Prometheus, was no longer just a control system. He had truly become one of the crew. An independent will, a free being, and loyal to the end,